Isabella always thought she had her life planned. She had dreams of studying abroad, making a name for herself in a city that never slept, and escaping the suffocating expectations of her small hometown. But life has a way of surprising you, and it did so with a force that left her breathless and terrified. She discovered she was pregnant on a quiet Thursday morning, when the sun filtered softly through her bedroom window, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to hope it might be a mistake, a false reading, a cruel trick of her own imagination. But deep down, she knew the truth, and with that truth came a storm of fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of what her family would say, and fear of the life she had envisioned crumbling like a fragile castle of sand. Her parents had always been proud of her discipline, her intelligence, and her grace. They had dreams for her that extended far beyond the borders of the small town that had raised her. Isabella knew they would never approve, especially given the circumstances. The father of her child, Diego, was not a villain. He was charming, funny, and someone she had loved deeply, but he was young, irresponsible, and unprepared for fatherhood. He had pleaded with her to consider keeping the child, yet his pleas carried a lack of commitment that stung sharper than any words of anger could. He loved her, but not enough to step into a life that demanded sacrifice, responsibility, and courage. Days turned into nights of silent tears. Isabella wandered through the streets of her town, feeling invisible, carrying a secret that weighed heavily on her chest. Every corner of her home whispered questions she couldn't answer, every familiar face a potential threat to the delicate secret she harbored. She thought of the future, of the child growing within her, of a life she could no longer keep to herself. And in the deepest recess of her heart, she made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives: she would leave. She would protect her child from judgment, from a world that was cruel and unforgiving, and from the mistakes of her own youth. Packing was silent work. She moved quickly, efficiently, deliberately, leaving no trace that would betray her absence. She packed her dreams, her fears, her baby's future into the few suitcases she could carry. In the mirror, she saw a reflection that was both familiar and foreign, a young woman standing on the precipice of a life she had never imagined, eyes filled with resolve and sorrow. The night she left, she walked through the streets she had known since childhood, every step heavy with the weight of goodbye. She did not look back, even as the wind carried the distant sound of a church bell, a reminder of the life she was abandoning. The journey to the city was long and lonely. Every mile seemed to echo with memories she could not escape. She arrived at a small apartment on the outskirts of a bustling metropolis, a place that would become her sanctuary and her prison. The city was indifferent, full of strangers whose lives intertwined briefly and then vanished, and Isabella found solace in that anonymity. She enrolled in night classes, took on jobs that were exhausting but necessary, and slowly built a life that allowed her to survive. And yet, no matter how busy she became, the child within her was a constant presence, a reminder of the love and loss she carried. Mateo was born on a rainy morning, his cries piercing the small apartment, and with them came a mixture of joy and fear. Isabella held him close, feeling the fragility of his tiny body, and promised herself he would never know the hardships that had forced her hand. She told herself stories of strength, stories that would keep her moving forward, stories that would shield him from the truth she could not yet face. Nights became her closest companion, filled with lullabies whispered into the darkness, dreams of a life where she and her son could exist without fear. As Mateo grew, so did the web of lies she had spun to protect them both. Friends asked about family she never mentioned, neighbors spoke of children she pretended not to have. Isabella smiled through the deception, each smile a small act of courage, each silence a shield for the boy she loved more than life itself. She watched him grow, his first steps, his first words, his first laugh, and each moment filled her with a profound mixture of pride and longing. She wondered what life would have been like if she had stayed, if she had faced her family's anger, if Diego had chosen differently. But the past was a shadow she could not chase, and the future a path she had to carve with her own hands. Years passed in a blur of work, school, and quiet moments of reflection. Isabella became adept at balancing the demands of survival with the joys of motherhood. She never allowed herself to linger too long on the thought of the men she had left behind, or the family who might never understand her choices. The city became a cocoon, a place where she could raise Mateo away from prying eyes, away from judgment, and away from the mistakes of her youth. And yet, even in her careful cocoon, there were cracks. Nights when she would wake to find Mateo staring at her with wide, innocent eyes, asking questions about family, about love, about the father he had never known. She would answer with stories half-true, tales spun from imagination and necessity, knowing that the truth could not yet be revealed. Mateo was a curious child, intelligent beyond his years, with a heart full of questions that Isabella struggled to answer. He loved to explore, to ask about the stars, about the people around him, and about the mysteries of life that even adults found difficult to comprehend. Isabella encouraged his curiosity, nurturing it with patience and care, yet always aware of the delicate line between protection and deception. She worried constantly, fearing that any misstep could unravel the fragile life they had built together. And still, despite her fears, she found joy in his laughter, in the warmth of his hand in hers, and in the quiet moments where the world outside faded, leaving only the two of them. Then, on the morning of his 8th birthday, life intervened in the most unexpected way. Mateo fell ill suddenly, a fever that would not break, a cough that seemed to shake his small frame, and Isabella felt a panic she had never known before. She rushed him to the hospital, her heart pounding, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. The city that had once been a sanctuary now felt vast and unforgiving, the streets unfamiliar and cold. She held him close, whispering words of comfort, trying to mask her own terror with calm. The hospital was a maze of sterile corridors, the smell of antiseptic a harsh reminder of vulnerability. Nurses guided them quickly, and she watched as Mateo was led away for examination, his small hand slipping from hers for a moment that felt like an eternity. In the waiting room, Isabella's thoughts raced. She remembered her past, the choices she had made, the secrets she had kept, and the life she had built from fragments of hope and courage. She thought of Diego, wondering where he was, what he would think if he saw them now. She thought of her parents, the faces she had longed to see, and the pain she had carried for years. And above all, she thought of Mateo, the boy who had changed her life in ways she could never have imagined, and who now depended on her more than ever. When the doctor finally appeared, the room seemed to grow still. He approached with a calm, professional demeanor, clipboard in hand, and eyes that seemed to hold a depth of understanding she could not place. He knelt slightly to speak to Mateo, who looked up at him with wary curiosity, and the sound of his voice struck something deep within Isabella. There was a familiarity in the way he spoke, a gentleness that seemed to echo from a place she had long forgotten. Her heart skipped a beat, a strange recognition stirring memories she had buried under years of silence and survival. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was impossible, that her mind was playing tricks on her, yet the feeling would not leave her. And so, as she watched the doctor examine her son, a sense of anticipation and dread intertwined in her chest. The story of her past, the secrets she had carried, and the life she had built were all converging in that sterile hospital room. For the first time in 8 years, the threads of her hidden life threatened to unravel, bringing with them truths she could no longer contain and a revelation that would change everything she thought she knew about family, love, and destiny. Isabella's heart pounded as she watched the doctor move around Mateo with calm precision, checking his vitals, asking gentle questions, and smiling reassuringly at him. Every gesture, every word, sent shivers down her spine. Something about him felt so achingly familiar that her chest tightened with a mix of dread and longing. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself it was impossible, that the universe could not be so cruel as to place her father in the same room with her child at a moment of crisis. Yet, the deeper she looked, the more she saw in his eyes, in the line of his jaw, in the way he held his hands, echoes of the man who had once held her, taught her, loved her unconditionally before life and circumstances had pulled them apart. As the doctor examined Mateo, he asked Isabella a few routine questions about his symptoms, and the sound of her own voice answering him made her feel unsteady. Something in the way he listened, attentive and patient, made her feel a strange mix of fear and hope. She noticed the way his eyes softened when Mateo winced, the care in his touch as he held the child's tiny wrist to measure his pulse. And then it hit her, the way he smiled, the slight crinkle near his eyes, the voice, oh, that voice, it was unmistakable. Her breath caught, tears welled, and the world seemed to tilt. Could it really be? No, it was impossible. Yet every instinct screamed the truth she was too afraid to speak aloud. Isabela? The doctor finally said, his voice gentle but now carrying an uncharacteristic note of hesitation. She froze. Her name, spoken by him, sounded almost like a whisper from the past, stirring memories she had tried to bury. She looked up at him, her eyes wide, searching for answers, trying to reconcile the man before her with the father she had not seen in nearly a decade. And then the recognition crystallized. This was her father. The man who had raised her, protected her, and loved her unconditionally. The man she had thought she would never see again, the man from whom she had kept the most painful secret of her life. The silence between them was deafening. Words failed her as she stared, unable to speak, unable to move, her mind a whirlwind of emotion. How could this be happening? After 8 years of silence, secrecy, and fear, here he was, in the same room, treating her child, looking at her with a mixture of professional calm and dawning realization. And she knew, with a sinking certainty, that the truth would surface, that the carefully built walls of her life were about to crumble, and that every choice she had made would demand confrontation. Her father's eyes widened slightly, an unspoken question passing between them. Isabela finally found her voice, trembling, soft but urgent. Dad, it's me, it's Isabela. The doctor's hands froze in midair, the clipboard slipping slightly. He blinked, confusion giving way to disbelief, then to recognition, and finally to a tidal wave of emotion he could not contain. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, as if rehearsing words that could never fully express the shock, the love, and the guilt flooding through him. Isabela, he whispered, voice breaking. My daughter. Tears streamed down Isabela's face as she nodded. I didn't. I couldn't. I had to protect him, Dad. I didn't want anyone to hurt him. I didn't want you to be angry, though. Her voice broke completely, and she could not finish. The words were heavy with years of silence, fear, and love, and yet in the sterile hospital room, they finally spilled free. Her father's eyes glistened with tears, and he stepped closer, placing a tentative hand on her shoulder. The warmth of his touch brought back memories of childhood safety, of bedtime stories, of laughter and guidance. Then, as if the universe had been waiting for this moment, Mateo looked up at the men bending down before him. Grandpa, he asked, his small voice curious and innocent. The word hung in the air, a bridge spanning the years of secrecy and pain, connecting 3 lives that had been fractured by choices and circumstance. Isabela's father knelt fully now, opening his arms. Yes, Mateo. Grandpa is here, he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Mateo ran into his arms, and Isabela watched, overwhelmed, as the two embraced. She felt a release unlike anything she had known, a cathartic flood of relief, joy, and love. In the days that followed, the hospital became a place not just of healing for Mateo, but of reconciliation for Isabela and her father. They spoke at length, sharing stories of lost years, of challenges and triumphs, of love and regret. Her father listened without judgment, his heart aching for the pain she had endured alone, and yet filled with pride at the strength and courage she had shown. He apologized for his absence in ways words could never fully convey, and she forgave him, realizing that life had placed them on a difficult path not out of malice but circumstance. Mateo's illness, San Felipe, was not severe, and as he recovered under the care of his grandfather, the bond between them grew stronger by the day. Isabela watched as her father guided him gently, teaching him small things, laughing at his curiosity, and showing a tenderness that she had always known existed in him. For Isabela, it was a revelation to see the man who had once been her protector now embracing her child with love she had only dreamed of, and for Mateo, it was the beginning of a relationship he had never imagined, a connection that would shape his childhood with warmth, security, and love. The experience changed Isabela in ways she could not have foreseen. The fear that had dominated her life, the secrecy that had shadowed her every decision, began to lift. She realized that life's twists and turns, however painful, could lead to moments of profound connection and joy. She understood that forgiveness was not weakness but strength, and that the courage to face the past could create a future filled with love. In her father's embrace, and in Mateo's laughter, she found a peace she had long sought, and a hope for the days to come. Before leaving the hospital, Isabella looked at the camera of life as if speaking directly to everyone who had walked a difficult path. She imagined telling viewers, life will test you, separate you from the people you love, and force you to make impossible choices. But no matter how long the years, no matter how deep the secrets, there is always hope. There is always a way to find love again, to heal, and to reconnect with the family you hold in your heart. Her story was one of courage, secrecy, and ultimately, reconciliation, a story that reminded everyone watching that even in the darkest moments, life has a way of bringing people back together. And as she turned to leave the hospital, holding Mateo's hand and walking alongside her father, Isabella felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. She knew that life's surprises could be both terrifying and beautiful, and that the bonds of family, once rediscovered, could heal wounds no time could erase. For viewers of her story, she imagined one simple message lingering in their hearts: cherish your loved ones, never give up on hope, and be brave enough to face the truths you have long hidden. And for those who wanted more stories of love, drama, and unexpected twists, she knew there was only one thing left to ask: subscribe, because the next story could change your life, just as this one changed hers. Life after the hospital visit was different, yet the changes were subtle at first. Isabella returned to her small apartment with Mateo, the warmth of her father's presence still lingering in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything had shifted, as if the universe had realigned itself to offer a second chance at the family she had lost. Yet, alongside the joy, a quiet anxiety remained. The truth of her departure, the secrets she had carried, and the unspoken choices she had made all demanded acknowledgement. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but the reunion had given her hope, and hope was a stronger companion than fear. Isabella's father insisted that she and Mateo spend more time with him. He moved gently, without imposing, creating opportunities for shared meals, walks in the park, and late-night talks that stretched into the quiet hours of the city. Mateo was naturally drawn to his grandfather, fascinated by his knowledge, his patience, and the small, intimate stories he shared of Isabella's childhood. Each story revealed parts of her that Mateo had never known, connecting him to the mother he adored in a new way and showing him the roots of his family. Isabella watched quietly, tears in her eyes, grateful that her son was forming a bond with the man she had feared he would never meet. One evening, after dinner, her father led them to the living room and said gently, "There is something I need to tell you, Isabella. Something I've carried for years, that I never had the courage to speak of." Her heart clenched. She had long feared this moment, the unveiling of hidden truths, and yet she nodded, urging him to continue. He took a deep breath, voice shaking slightly. "When you left that night, I blamed myself. I thought perhaps I had failed as a father, that I had pushed you away somehow. I never knew you were pregnant. I never knew about Mateo. And for years, that silence haunted me." Isabella felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. Relief that her father was honest, that he acknowledged the pain of the past, and sorrow for the years of misunderstanding and lost opportunities. She reached for his hand, the one that had guided her through childhood and now trembled with vulnerability. "Dad. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you wouldn't forgive me, that you'd be angry, and I just wanted to protect Mateo. I thought I was doing the right thing." Her voice trembled, a raw honesty that had been suppressed for years now finding its way into the room. They spoke late into the night, recounting memories, mistakes, and choices that had shaped their lives. Isabella shared the struggles of motherhood, the sleepless nights, the fears that had driven her to hide her child. Her father listened, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief, sometimes offering a soft laugh or a sigh, always with love and compassion. Mateo, curled up between them, listened too, absorbing the stories of his family, learning that life could be difficult but that love had the power to heal even the deepest wounds. As days turned into weeks, the family began to forge routines together. Mateo's laughter echoed through the apartment, blending with the warmth of a bond that had been years in the making. Isabella felt the heavy weight of guilt lift, replaced by the joy of reconciliation. Yet, amidst this newfound peace, another layer of truth quietly awaited. Letters she had left behind in her old hometown, unopened and unsent, contained confessions and messages for people she had once loved. Among them was a letter addressed to Diego, the boy who had been the father of her child. Though she had thought of him often, she had never reached out, fearing rejection or anger. But now, with the strength of family around her, she realized the time had come to face the past fully. Isabella wrote to Diego, not with expectation but with honesty, sharing her journey, Mateo's birth, and the life they had built. She spoke of forgiveness, of the challenges she had faced, and the love she still hoped could exist in a different form. Weeks later, a response arrived, tentative, cautious, yet filled with a desire to understand. Diego expressed surprise, regret, and a wish to meet Mateo someday, though he understood that trust and healing could not be rushed. Isabella read the letter to her father, who nodded approvingly, proud of her courage and honesty. Mateo, sensing the change in tone, asked simple, curious questions, to which Isabella responded with gentle honesty, teaching him that life could be messy but that integrity and love mattered above all. Then, one quiet Sunday morning, Isabella's father suggested a family outing, something to solidify the bond that had begun to form. They walked through the city park, sunlight filtering through tall trees, and Mateo ran ahead, laughing with the joy of a child unburdened by secrets. Isabella followed, hand in hand with her father, feeling a serenity she had never thought possible. They sat on a bench, watching Mateo chase a butterfly, and her father said softly, "Life has a way of giving second chances, even when we least expect them. We can't change the past, but we can shape the future." Isabella nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. She had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the strength to face it, that love could bridge years of separation, and that family, once reunited, could heal wounds that had seemed permanent. Mateo ran back to them, breathless, asking questions about the trees, the birds, and his grandfather's childhood. In that moment, Isabella realized that they were no longer defined by secrets or mistakes. They were defined by love, by resilience, and by the willingness to embrace the unpredictable beauty of life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of gold and rose, Isabella felt a surge of gratitude. She imagined viewers watching her story, imagining their own families, their own struggles, and the secrets they carried. She wanted them to feel hope, courage, and inspiration. She wanted them to believe that no matter how complicated life became, reconciliation, love, and second chances were always possible. And as she looked into the eyes of her father and son, she felt certain that the best stories were yet to be written. Before leaving the park, she turned slightly, as if speaking directly to her audience, "Life will surprise you. It will challenge you. It will test you in ways you never imagined. But it will also give you moments of beauty, love, and reunion that make every struggle worth it. Cherish your loved ones, be brave, and never give up on hope." And if you want more stories that will touch your heart and inspire you, don't forget to subscribe, because the next story could change your life. With that, they walked home together, a family once fractured, now united, stepping into the future with hearts full of love, hope, and the unshakable knowledge that even the deepest wounds could be healed with time, truth, and courage.